Starwood Games, the folks behind Barbaria, have just dropped a massive update for the game, including a whole new mode out of nowhere, and I really did not expect this. Before we dive into the mode itself, let's talk about Barbaria a little bit. Barbaria is an asynchronous multiplayer game, meaning that you're not in the same physical space as other players, but you go and raid their base and they can watch that replay after the fact and see you in their play space. You're interacting by proxy, not in the same area as, say, in Legendary Tales or Pavlov. Barbaria was one of my sleeper hits of 2023 in terms of PSVR2. The game came out of absolutely nowhere, and I ended up loving it by the end of it. Was it perfect? No. The visuals were alright. Some of the assets were very clearly indie in terms of how they were animated, but overall the game really blew me away with how fun the combat was and the replay value you could get out of all the situations and raiding other people's bases. However, if you're looking for another challenge to see how far you can get with multiple bases in succession, this is where the brand new Caverns of the Unknown update comes through, as you battle through procedurally generated caverns instead of player-made ones, in a roguelike mode to earn new resources, get items in between levels, and also climb the leaderboard, which is one of the biggest incentives to play Barbaria every single week. Now, these caverns are very similar to the player-made ones. They are procedural though, meaning that sometimes the layouts can be a little bit confusing compared to what you're usually used to, but after jumping on it earlier today, I can say that despite some of the janky level design that comes from procedural generation, this is a really fun challenge for those players who want to hone their skills. You start with nothing at the start of a run, and then you progress through like any other roguelike game until you die, and then you can start again. However, the game does actually limit how many runs you can do. I think you have to do a couple raids in between each run, at least that's how it was for me, so I jumped into other players' bases and raided them back before jumping straight back into the roguelike mode. The gameplay itself is exactly the same as it is in normal Barbaria when you're raiding other people's bases. The only difference is it's generated by the game and not a real person. So looking at the gameplay, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between them. While the roguelike mode is a load of fun, it is just that addition to the game in that small mode that you can jump into from time to time, and there have actually been a few other additions since the last time I covered the game, so I want to go through those as well just in case you missed it. Before we get onto those update notes on the game since the last time I covered it though, I do want to just give my verdict on the roguelike mode. It's more of the same for Barbaria, but with a bit of a twist in that you're constantly challenging yourself to see how far you can get, which is the main draw. There's no downtime between levels aside from picking what buff you want from the in-between rooms. You're straight into the next one to fight more enemies, and that's where the gameplay differentiates from normal Barbaria. Anyway, let's get into some of the other updates that they've made since the last time I covered the game, because some of you guys might not be aware. In November, the 1.4 update also brought a bunch of new features like training in the gym in the game, so you can place your champion or your minion on one of the workout stations, and they'll basically get a temporary stat buff as they train there, and then you can place them down into the battlefield and they'll fight better than they did before. You can also now name your characters and track their stats, how many kills they've got, how many times they've died. This is such a fun little feature that I love to see in the game, and I did notice this when jumping on for the first time in, I guess it must have been months, because I don't think this was there the last time I played Barbaria. Seeing a character naming station was pretty funny, as there was a little lawyer goblin on top ready to rename the characters.
Look at this fella. It's kind of unnerving how they follow you, innit?
And the stat tracking is just appreciated because it gives a bit more character to each of the goblins and the people who are defending your cavern, and makes it feel a lot more personal to you as a player. And finally, they've also added human shielding, which I find quite funny. The cannons are absolute bastards in this game to try and take down, so now you can hold up a goblin and essentially make them take the fall for you, which is always appreciated with these immersive features. Anyway, that is how far Barbaria's come since we last talked about it. I'm really interested to see where they take this game in the future as well, because there's a lot of potential for different enemies that they keep adding, different weapons, and especially different layouts for dungeons, because even jumping into it now, a couple months after launch, I'm seeing dungeon layouts and pieces that I didn't see at launch, which is really, really cool. Maybe people have just unlocked them, but I think they've added a couple since then as well, which is really, really sick. I do think the game in its current state would be fine to sustain a player base for quite a while, and because it's asynchronous multiplayer, it doesn't rely on a massive player base active all the time, which is a really good thing. But I do think more updates would be appreciated by the player base and the fan base, because Barbaria really is a gem on PSVR 2. It's not absolutely polished to the degree of a AAA game or anything, but as an indie, it really hits the nail on the head and has an A+ for execution on the idea that they were really going for, so excited to see where it goes in the future. Please feel free to go and play the game. The update is free, it's just come out, and you can jump into the caverns to see how far you can get and place yourself on that leaderboard. If you haven't jumped into Barbaria for a while, this is a very good excuse to go and do so, because there genuinely is a lot of fun to be had in this mode. And you might encounter some new enemies that you haven't seen before, like I did, because I clearly didn't get far enough in player-made levels to find whatever this thing was.
Wait, what? What are you? What are you? Oh!
Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy, feel free to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next video.